Hi everyone. Today, let's talk about the indicators that I'm using to trade right now. If you like trading stocks and options and making money, definitely like and subscribe. This is not a video I make all the time, but I do make technical analysis videos every day that the markets are open, as well as Sundays. So make sure you hit the bell so you don't miss out on any of those future episodes. Welcome to the Portfolio Bulletin. Let's get started. So looking at the charts, you can see my first indicator here is an EMA. I have the 9, 21, 55, and 144 EMAs on here. You can see them all in line here. This is the NASDAQ 15-minute chart. I also have the 200 SMA just because I know a lot of people pay attention to that indicator. So I did put it on there just so I keep a pulse on where the rest of the markets are watching certain levels. I also have a rolling VWAP here. You can see this is the orange. It's much more reactive to volume. So you can see it was rising as the market was rising here, but after hours, even though the market was rising, the VWAP basically went flat because there's no volume really at the end of day. And then on this upper panel here, I also have a visible range volume profile. This is telling me how much buying and selling is happening at various levels. You can see lots of volume done here at 291. You can see multiple reactions with that price level, big push through there. And then you can see as we came back down into this zone to retest that 200 SMA, you can also see large volume being done in that zone. And then watching what happens from there after the large volume was done, you can see we gap up and continue to rally. And then right here, you can see big volume drop-offs. I'm expecting to push through that zone. You can see we push through that zone very rapidly, get into this area of higher volume. We start to consolidate a little bit. And then as we break through that zone, we push very quickly through low volume until we find this next higher level of volume up at around 299.50. So that's kind of how I watch this. It's kind of like a support and resistance level just based on volume. I want to see price push through these higher volume levels, and then I expect it to push through the lower volume levels and then find resistance in that next higher volume area. And it really helps me set price targets and make sure I'm watching the markets at critical times. I generally watch the markets throughout the day anyway, but that's what I'm looking for on this. If I do come back down and retest a zone, like if we were to come back down and retest this 291 level, I would want to see it hold based on how high the volume was. You can also note that the yellow is selling volume and that the blue is buying volume. So up here, lots of buyers coming in here. It actually shows you over on that left side. You can see the blue representing 268,000 shares and the yellow only representing 72,000 shares. So the vast majority of transactions up at this higher level is buying. It's worth noting that you can see lots of selling done at these previous levels, and we still spiked up following that volume. So may or may not matter to you. Obviously, with the EMAs and the VWAP, I want to be above that price if I'm buying, and I want to be below that price if I'm selling. I don't always trade with the trend, but the majority of the time I try to trade with the trend. And if I'm going to counter trend trade, I take very small profits and make sure that I'm getting out of those trades quickly. Otherwise, you can see down here, I just have a standard MACD. Generally, I'm looking for movement towards that zero line. Obviously, the 15-minute chart was continuing to rally despite having very little volume on the 15-minute chart. Gets a little bit more difficult to trade, but you can see over going back to Tuesday, we had a push from red volume into green volume here. And that was a pretty good bullish trade. And then zooming in here, you can see as soon as we get a step down on that momentum, we started topping out here, and then we got that move back down where momentum was telling us we're moving in that bearish direction. And this was a pretty classic trade, going from bearish momentum into bullish, giving you that swing up. And then as we start to flip to bearish, you can see get that swing down. So this would have been a great day to be trading the MACD. And then below that, I do have RSI and volume as well. And then my RSI does have an SMA on there. So if I'm above the SMA, I'm expecting bullish price action. You can see here, we got above it pretty early in the session around 10 o'clock. And then we stayed above it throughout all the way until that 1350 candle. So would have captured a lot of this move just trading based off that SMA. And then once we cross that SMA and move down, you can see we got a consistent move down all the way into oversold conditions. Doesn't always work out that way, but it's a pretty good indicator that you're on the right side of the trade, depending on if you're above or below that SMA. I also watch the 50 line, which is always interesting. If you cross the 50 line to the downside, that's usually a bearish indicator. And if you come up through the 50 line, that's generally an indicator that you're going to get a bullish swing. In terms of volume, I try to watch where we have the highest volumes and what that candle did. Looking at the next day here on 1 March, you can see we have a candle of huge volume in comparison to everything else right here on the 9 o'clock candle. And that was hugely, hugely bearish. We got a couple of reversals here, but we couldn't get back above VWAP. That's that orange line here. Tested it a few times and sold off from that level, indicating that the bears were really in control. And then you can see the next day we had that huge gap down. Ended up being a reversal later in the day, but that big volume candle, big bearish candle did give you a solid indicator that bearish trades were going to be in play that whole day. Moving over to this other chart, this is the Heikin-Ashi chart versus the candlestick chart. Gives you different directions in terms of trade, and it's usually fairly accurate here. You can see once we turned green, we had a nice little push higher. Once we turned red over here, pretty consistent move down. There are certain areas, though, where it does get a little bit choppy. You can see in here you have a couple of flips. It's hard to determine direction. That's where your support and resistance lines start to play a role. Getting lots of dojis, potentially indicating you could get a trend reversal, especially after you're fairly overextended here. I do have a money supply index, and it's telling you multiple times this is not where you want to be buying. These are oversold conditions. Of course, it still did continue to trend down after those oversold conditions. So you do have to watch price action and levels. But you can see here you're getting higher and higher money supply readings, even though price is going lower. Very common divergence trigger there. And then you end up getting a nice little swing up to the VWAP, which is generally where you want to end that trade if you're counter trend trading like you would be here. You can see you're below all the EMAs, still counter trend trading, but you get a nice little trade there at the end of day. I still keep volume on here. This is another pretty good indicator. You see volume ticking up significantly as price is falling quickly. Pretty good indicator that you're going to get a continuation on that move. And then counter to that, you see price falling. Volume really high early in the session, but as the market rises, you see volume falling off. Generally, that's indicating to me that this move is going to run out of momentum, kind of top out and fall like it did. So volume telling you that this is going to fail. And then as it starts to tip over, volume telling you that this is probably going to continue downwards. And then lastly here, I have TSV. Again, very similar in terms of how you trade this. You want volume to be moving in your direction of trade. In terms of strength, trade's similar to RSI. You're generally looking for divergence. So you can see here we had a strong reading at the end of day on Thursday. And then the readings here on Friday were actually lower strength, but price was going much, much higher. So that's an indicator that we could potentially be rolling over. You can see money supply indicator also rolling over here at the end of day. Of course, it is after hours, so volume is generally going to be lower. You can see super low volume after hours here, but it is an indicator telling you that you might be looking for a little bit of a pullback early in the Monday session. Moving over to my tasty charts, I do have a couple of different things here. I still keep the EMAs on there, but I do have what's called an ATR band that I like on here. Gives you a center line, which is this white line in the middle. The white line above here is the 21 EMA. The center line, that's your ATR center line. And you have 1 ATR, 2 ATR, 3 ATR to the downside, and similarly to the upside. Tends to be a pretty good indicator on where you're going to top out on these moves. This is the 1 minute chart, so you do overthrow it sometimes, but you can see we're riding that ATR band, and then eventually you start to drop off of there, and then you get a nice little pullback into that lower second ATR band, telling you you're a little extended to the downside. Because this is a bullish rally, you can see the 55 EMA here on the minute chart also acting as support. And then here I also have the ATR trailing stop. Blue dots here to the downside indicate that this is a bullish trend. Purple dots to the upside indicating that you're in a little bit of a bearish lull. You can see we took out that ATR stop, got a little bit of a sell-off, and then we had the bullish ATR stops come back in, and then we continued that rally. So just a nice little stop indicator giving you a little bit of extra direction. And then down here I have RVOL. So this is giving me a line here at RVOL level 2. Purple lines on here indicate an RVOL much higher than 2. This little dot here came all the way up to 5. This is at the end of a rally, a high RVOL reading, bearish candle on that high RVOL reading, generally indicating that this rally is probably going to start petering out. And then volume pretty much drops off on this up move. And then soon after you start to get a decline. And then RVOL picking back up as we decline, indicating that we're getting a pretty solid pullback. And you can see this was one of the bigger pullbacks on the day. This is the Friday chart, which was a very strong rally day. Obviously, the markets are not always like this, but that's generally what I'm looking for in terms of RVOL. We have RVOL being very high here as we're rallying. These are all green candles on the big RVOL readings, generally indicating that we're moving higher. And then, like I said, RVOL in red candles, generally telling me that this is probably going to be done here real soon. Down here, I have a volume-weighted MACD. This one tends to be a little bit tougher to trade, and usually I want to see at least bearish momentum, not just fading bullish momentum before I start taking trades. You can see we had fading bullish momentum, but price was still continuing higher. That can definitely tell you that this rally might be ending soon, but until you get that real trigger of bearish momentum, you can see that big RVOL candle being red, and then the MACD also giving you that first bearish signal here. Then you start ticking in that bearish direction as price starts to fall. So again, indicating that this is a pretty decent pullback. And that went from 298.85 all the way down to 298.30. So that would have been a pretty decent counter trend scalp. I wouldn't have stayed in for that long because it is counter trend. I tend to take about 20 cents on counter trend if I got a pretty good entry, sometimes less than that. And then when I do get in with the trend, then I'm starting to look for a little bit bigger takes. And going over here to the 1225 candle, you can see big RVOL, not quite as big, but pretty decent. And then you get a big green candle and a nice little follow through here, indicating that you should be looking for a bullish trade. Generally, you want to wait for at least a decent pullback. You also have ATR dots here to the upside, which haven't been taken out yet. And you didn't take them out throughout this move. So wait for that pullback. Wait to get the entry at a solid level of support, almost retesting this previous support. And then you get a nice little follow through. And that was from 298.34 up to about 298.78, which was this previous high, which would have been a great take profit. Could have held it through this pullback and then got a higher take. But you can see here, no high volume candles in this zone, indicating that this is probably not going to continue, especially once you get a little bit extended here on the ATR bands, getting close to that third ATR band, no RVOL telling you that this is going to continue, and then you get that pullback. So over here, though, you can see testing that upper ATR band, get a nice RVOL perk up, indicating that you could still be buying in here and continue this rally to the upside. You can see you get a small pullback here, but pretty quickly you're making new highs all the way up to 299.50. So that's generally how I trade that. You would want to be a little bit cautious in here because you are getting bearish momentum on the MACD here, but price is still going higher, so you do have to respect that. If you are on top of the 9 EMA, generally I'm trading to the bullish side, and I don't trade counter trend or bearish until we are at least below that 9 EMA on the charts here. That was a ton of information, and it all went fairly quickly. You might need a couple of rewatches if you're serious about learning the indicators and the way that I trade them. I know there's tons of strategies out there, but this is mine, and it's worth paying attention to. It's been fairly successful here recently since I developed it. I added a lot of these things here recently over the last week, and so far I think it's going pretty well. Let me know down in the comments if you like videos like this. I can go more in depth on certain things and give a little bit more examples on certain indicators. If you like it, definitely let me know. Otherwise, definitely like and subscribe if you got any value out of this, and make sure you hit the bell so you don't miss out on any of my technical analysis videos. Of course, none of this is financial advice. This is all for entertainment purposes. Good luck in your trading and have a great day.